I want to welcome everybody to our Demystifying Forensic Science speakers event. We do these every now and again. We're really excited to work with the American Academy of Forensic Science on this. For those of you that weren't here earlier, across the street at the museum, we had a great free event sponsored by the Galleria Mall. And it's great for us to partner with people like the Academy. We're very focused on science. We love doing things for the community to expand the education of young kids. And we had over 500 kids next door learning about DNA, fingerprints, and all different areas of forensic science. So I just want to give a hand to the Academy for letting us partner with you guys. So thank you. So this event is sponsored by the Las Vegas Science and Technology Festival. And as I said, it is brought to us by the Academy of Forensic Sciences. One person I want to introduce is Marilyn Gillespie, who's our founder and the executive director of the museum. She's right here. And all this wouldn't be able to do any of this stuff without her. So welcome, Marilyn. First person that we're going to bring up, who's also our MC for the program, is Dr. Bruce Goldberger. He's the past president of AAFS, and he's also the media liaison. He's going to be our MC for our event. Dr. Goldberger.
Greetings. Welcome to the 2016 American Academy of Forensic Sciences Community Outreach Program. The Academy is honored to partner with the museum to help further the scientific understanding of the forensic sciences by the general public. Together we have created a once-in-a-lifetime experience for you, which shares the reality of the forensic sciences with adults and children. On behalf of the Academy, I would like to thank the Las Vegas Natural History Museum for the opportunity to work with us to present today's CSI minicamp. That was the program this morning, as well as this afternoon's forensic science lecture. They have worked hard to make today's events happen, and we appreciate all that they have done to help facilitate this educational community outreach. I would especially like to thank Marilyn Gillespie, Executive Director, Amy Page, who's a strategic and interpretive planner for the museum, and Chris Palatino, Communications and Developmental Officer. In the past, the Academy has partnered with prominent institutions across the U.S., including the Smithsonian Institute, the Atlanta Aquarium, the Chicago Cultural Center, the Washington State Botanic Gardens, and the Orlando Science Center. Today, we're pleased to work with the Las Vegas Natural History Museum, joined by our impressive list of community partners. Now, I'd like to introduce to you our presenters of today's program, Demystifying the Forensic Sciences. John Gerns, Dr. Lisa Gavin, Dr. Professor Jose Almoral, and Kenneth Melson. Well, let's get started. And our first speaker today is John Gerns. Mr. Gerns is the Academy President-elect and is an instructor at the Criminal Justice Forensic Science for Central Texas College and is an adjunct assistant professor in the forensic science for the University of Maryland University College. He also provides forensic investigative consultations on a variety of topics. Mr. Gerns has 32 years of experience with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. He is intimately familiar with all aspects of military criminal investigative policies and procedures and has spent his entire career ensuring the latest innovations in the forensic sciences are applied to Air Force and Department of Defense investigations. He has received numerous honors, including the American Academy of Forensic Sciences John R. Hunt Award in recognition of his outstanding contribution to forensic science, the United Nations Special Service Medal for UN service in the former Yugoslavia, the Certificate of Appreciation from the Department of State for dedicated service to the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, the United States Air Force Decoration for Exceptional Civilian Service, Decoration for Exemplary Civilian Service, and finally the Achievement Medal in recognition of contributions to the Gander air crash. John?
Well, first of all, I want to take this opportunity to thank everybody for showing up. It's our pleasure to come here and tell you a little bit about the Academy. So, as Bruce told you, I've been around for a while, and I always tell people when I would go out to assist is that, I'm not smarter than you, I've just seen more. And so that's kind of what I'm going to discuss today. But first I want to tell you a little bit about the Academy. The American Academy was founded in 1948, 3 years before I was born. Yeah, I'm 1951. And basically, people wonder, well, what is forensic science? You see a lot of stuff on television and so forth. But in essence, it's the application of scientific principles and technological practices to the purpose of justice and the study of resolution of criminal, civil, and regulatory issues. Now, that's a mouthful. Basically, it's taking science and applying it, to the resolution of a crime. It's that simple. But the objectives of the Academy are several. Number one, to promote professionalism, integrity, which is critical, competency, education, foster research, improve practice, and encourage collaboration in the forensic sciences. When you do an investigation, it's never one aspect, it's never one discipline. It's multitude. It has to be a multidisciplinary approach, regardless of the type of investigation you're involved in. So the Academy consists of 11 sections representing a very wide range of forensic specialties. The members are physicians, attorneys, dentists, that we call forensic odontologists, toxicologists, anthropologists, document examiners, digital evidence experts, psychiatrists, psychologists, engineers, physicists, chemists, criminalists, educators, and others. It's comprised of 50 United States, Canada, and 70 additional countries. In fact, this year we have one additional country, and unfortunately the name escapes me right now, but this year we will have 71 foreign countries represented in the Academy. Our headquarters is located in Colorado Springs, and we do quite a bit to also foster to our future. In other words, the young forensic scientists, the ones that we are encouraging, to follow the road that we have been on. And we do that through, like the thing this morning, the CSI mini camps. That gives children of all ages an opportunity to get their hands dirty. What kid doesn't love to get their hands dirty? And now you're doing it, with some oversight from experts explaining to you, well, this is what you're seeing, and this is how we use it. Bruce was saying, I teach for 2 extension campuses in Germany, and I love to, number one, dispel myths, because even some of the textbooks that some of the school uses are outdated. Not because, there are changes that are occurring in the entire disciplines of the forensic sciences. And as experts, you have to stay abreast of those. It's critical to your credibility, particularly you have to testify. Our annual meeting meets every year in February, and normally there are over 600 scientific papers, and we have seminars, workshops, and it's an opportunity, and the reason people come, remember I said how quickly things are changing. So this is an opportunity to hear from the experts in the field, their research, what they're doing, some myths that they have dismissed, but also to bring you, who are moving up in the world of the forensics in your respective discipline, so you don't make a mistake based on old information. And that's why these annual meetings are so critical, and also in our Journal of Forensic Science. So the key is to read. I used to work for an individual years ago, and I used to love his saying. He said, someone who cannot read has nothing over someone who won't. So, we have to, in this age of digitalization, don't forget to read. It's critical. But, for example, at this year's meeting in wonderful Las Vegas, right now we have over 4,000 attendees that are coming. And normally it's around 4,000, 4,500. And we have 500 registrants from foreign countries. In other words, of those 70, 500 people are coming, plus that one from the new country. We're going to have 300 exhibitors present at the Academy. Now, why is that important? Because these are the people that through research develop new technology that we can use in our job. And they come and they give demonstrations with it, at their booths. And of course, they're here to make money too. If the new improved, widget, you want that for your laboratory or for your crime scene kit, they have it and they'll sell it to you. But it's great to have them here. But the other thing I wanted to discuss a little bit about was one of the things that I mentioned when I was telling you the objectives of the Academy. And one of those things is integrity. Integrity is critical in everything that we do in life, regardless of what your age is. And particularly as an investigator or a forensic scientist, your integrity is critical. If that is ever questioned, it will haunt you for the rest of your career. And so it is so critical. It's not like getting caught, with your hand in a cookie jar. Now we all do make mistakes. And the key is when you do make a mistake, because I've testified and I made a mistake. And the defense tries to jump on it and they say, well, sir, didn't you say this? I said, yes, sir, I made a mistake. Don't try to tap dance. But every aspect of investigation, regardless of the forensic discipline, requires integrity. And part of that is also, you have to remain objective in your investigation. And what I mean by that is let your evidence tell you what happened. Don't listen to what somebody else is saying, well, I believe this happened, or I believe this has happened. Let the evidence tell you what happened. Because evidence is not going to lie to you. It may change its facial features to you, but it's not going to lie. And if it's examined, and if it's, number one, identified, number two, it has to be collected properly and preserved properly in order for the lab to get it and do their magic. But remember, an investigation is like a puzzle. I'm sure everybody in this room at one time, even in today's digital era, has done puzzles on a table. You empty the box and you got all these little pieces. When I do a puzzle, I always try to do the edges first, But you look at a piece and you say, okay, that's blue, and you're assuming that's probably part of the sky. But if you don't know what the picture is, it could be part of a lake or a pond. So you're making an improper assumption. But as you're putting all those pieces together, and that's what we do in a crime scene, those pieces are our evidence. And basically, once you get it all together, now you have a picture of what happened. And I want to tell you about a story that I never forget that my dad told me. He grew up during the Depression. Some of the older folks in here, I'm not that old, but your parents have probably told you about it. But anyway, to earn some extra money, he worked in a lumber mill. And once a month, there was an individual that the foreman, who was like the boss, would see this guy taking a wheelbarrow full of sawdust out of the lumber mill. Every month, one time. And so everybody's wondering, what the heck is he doing with all this sawdust? He was stealing wheelbarrows. The sawdust was just a method to cover up what he was doing. But they're assuming that he is just stealing sawdust. But in reality, he was taking wheelbarrows. And then he was selling them on the side. The other thing I want to be clear is that, you are our future. The youngsters, who took part in the CSI minicamp today, hopefully they got the urge. They got the, kind of how you describe it, the zeal to get involved in this. It is nothing greater than finding the bad guy or the bad woman who committed a crime. And you do that through doing it properly, and you testify properly, and they get to justice. It can also exonerate them. People will point, oh, it had to have been that person, but your evidence exonerates that person. Remember, objectivity is the key. Objectivity is the key. So, and finally, what I want to do is say, if you're interested in this, early on, find yourself a mentor. In other words, somebody that take you under their wing and help you through. Within the Academy, we just had an ad hoc program last year to study our mentorship. And they came up with a very good survey. Actually, we got over 800 people took the survey. And if you're familiar with surveys, that's astronomical number. It really is. And we wanted to know, what can we do better in our mentorship with you? And so that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about this week. But in final, I just wanted to say, like I said, our future are the young forensic scientists. Anything that we can do to get them involved, in this fantastic, world that we work in. Because I'm telling you, one of the greatest things I love about forensics is that you see something new all the time. Just when you think, oh yeah, I've seen it all, bingo, something new comes along. And life has to be challenging. It keeps it exciting. And so my theme for this coming year, not now, but 2016, is what I'm talking about. I'm saying that our future is a reflection of our past. And we're going to be talking about the evolution of the forensic sciences. So, and our next meeting will be in New Orleans. But once again, thank you very much for allowing us to come. And Bruce, thank you. And all the people involved, Marilyn, thank you very much for your hospitality. And thank you.
Thank you, John. Before we move on, I do want to take this opportunity to introduce the president of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, who's here, and I'm not sure how long he's going to be here for. He's from Washington, D.C. It's Dr. Victor Whedon. So thank you for coming. So next, it's really a great honor for me, and it was a pleasure to meet Dr. Gavin just a few minutes ago, but she is one of your community members. She works here in Las Vegas, so maybe some of you have seen her on TV, maybe in court, probably in the newspaper at least a few times. So we're really happy that she could come here tonight to help us out with this program. Dr. Lisa Gavin. She's originally from New England. She graduated from Mount Holyoke College and went on to receive her Master in Public Health from Columbia University and the University of Connecticut School of Medicine. She completed her residency and a surgical pathology fellowship at Hartford Hospital. Dr. Gavin completed her forensic pathology fellowship at the Office of the Medical Investigator in New Mexico and now works as a forensic pathologist here in Clark County at the Office of the Coroner Medical Examiner. Thank you.
I'm Dr. Lisa Gavin, and I'm a forensic pathologist here at the Clark County Coroner's Office here in Las Vegas, and it's my pleasure, as I say, to present to you what the role of the forensic pathologist is in medical legal death investigation. I do have to put up the warning. You are going to see some pictures that might make you want to turn your head, but to my knowledge, there are no dead bodies in this particular presentation. All this is taken from prime time, so everything can be Googled. But if you're like my mother-in-law, you will turn your head, so just in case. The forensic pathologist, our role is to determine the cause of death and manner of death in sudden and unexpected deaths, whether they be violent or suspicious in nature or just sudden. We're highly trained professionals, and most of all, we're physicians. Our education and training after high school goes through 4 years of college, 4 years of medical school, 4 years of pathology residency, and then a year of forensic pathology. What is a pathology residency? And pathology is a subspecialty or a specialty of medicine. It's the doctor to the doctor. A lot of you are familiar with your practitioners, your family medicine, or your whether or not you're going to a surgeon. Though pathology is just one aspect of medicine. And in a pathology residency, we often receive things that we end up calling specimens. If you've gone to your doctor and you've had biopsies performed, or if you've had the unfortunate circumstance of having to have something removed, like a breast or a colon, those specimens will go to the pathologist, and the pathologist will prosect them, cut those specimens, and place them into cassettes. And those little cassettes will then be used to generate glass slides. And those, during your residency program, you learn how to prosect these specimens to be able to generate slides from which diagnoses can be made. And part of that process is learning how to do that at the microscope with those slides. And part of that, it becomes where an attending physician who generally has a lot more gray hair than you do, who's been doing it for a number of years, will end up teaching all of us soon-to-be pathologists how to do it, what to look for. What are you looking for underneath those glass sides to be able to make the diagnoses? Is there cancer? Is there not cancer? Is the margin free if there is cancer? And what happens next? And then they'll communicate that information to the physician that's taking care of that individual and decide what the next steps are. Forensic pathology is a subspecialty of that area. So you know about internal medicine, and then a cardiologist would be a subspecialist amongst that. Forensic pathologists are subspecialists in pathology. They end up focusing on the cause of death and the manner of death. And their role becomes broader than just looking at what the diagnosis is going to be. They're responsible for working with a variety of agencies and taking in a variety of information to be able to come to their conclusions. So although it may have started back in my day where Quincy was the one that I all wanted to be when I grew up, it's now evolved a lot further than that, and everybody's become more familiar with what the role of a forensic pathologist is. One of the things besides knowing all of the medical information that we have in our training to become physicians, to become pathologists, is we also get involved in what goes on at the scene. Where is the event? Where was the body discovered? What information can we gain from that that's going to provide us something regarding the cause of death, regarding the manner of death? And scene investigation becomes a big part of that. It may not always be some type of skeletal remains, although in Las Vegas, as you imagine, it's a desert and we tend to have our share of skeletons. Often we end up getting called to a scene where we have a body. Now, to my knowledge, that's a living actor. That is not a... But with that said, the pathologist becomes often called out to a scene. Sometimes you are called out here in Clark County, where you may need to investigate what's going on with that particular individual at the scene and try to see whether or not there's information around that body that provides useful towards the cause of death and useful information towards the manner of death. Here in Clark County, we have many investigators that go out to the scene for us, and they're trained. All of our investigators are ABMDI certified to be able to go out to scenes and provide a legal death investigation. And we are a separate agency from law enforcement. We do our own investigations. Although we may work in conjunction with them simultaneously, we have our own people that go out and take their own information down and provide that information to the forensic pathologist for us to be able to draw our conclusions. And several of our investigators are here today. So what happens next? That body then gets transported back to the autopsy suite and back to the office. And that's sometimes where I'll first come involved with the body and be able to see what's going on. One of my pet peeves about the show is we really do gown up. We don't walk in there in like my nice suit. I do wear my PPE when I do my examinations. In fact, I'm a stickler for it. The forensic technologist here will tell you that if you're not wearing a mask, I'll call you out on it every time because it's your lungs and I want you to be healthy. But everybody wears their PPE, and so even though some of these photos and the shows don't show that, we absolutely take our profession seriously and we will wear it. So we do gown up. The external examination becomes an important part of our investigation. Once we get the body into our autopsy suite, we begin to do our examination to see what's present on the body. We look for, obviously, what sex is the individual, what kind of hair color do they have, if with their eyes, we can tell their eye color. We do all of those kinds of basic information, but we also move on beyond that. What are the injuries that are present on the body? Are there any other identifying marks and scars that are present? What information do we need to gain to be able to provide us the cause of death and the manner of death in this particular individual? And how does that exam provide that information for us? course, moving on, we're going to have tools of the trade, and every occupation does, and these are some of ours. Everything from the saws down to the cassettes that you saw earlier to be able to take tissue samples as we move through our examination become important. Then, so of course, there's scalpel, and everybody always needs to have a way to get in. We always need our assistants to be with us. They don't quite gown up to this extent, but we do need to get into the body, and we begin classically with a Y incision in the body. Again, any of these pictures, if anyone is really interested in looking what the procedure of a full autopsy is, you actually can see that online. There are videos of that. You have to sign in and be of a certain age, but that is something that's out there to be able to be seen. But in these pictures, I'm not going to go into that detail for you, so fear not. With that said, the Y incision becomes important for many reasons. Obviously, it's going to give us an opportunity to visualize what's inside, but as you can see, the way the distribution of the incision is that we can still put clothing back on this individual. We can be able to put this individual into a presentation mode for them to be able to be shown at a wake or a service afterwards, despite the fact that they've had an autopsy procedure done. So the Y incision is more than just being able to get inside and look. It's also to be able to preserve the aesthetics for a person if they want to go on for their family to have their services and their funeral. Now, with that said, we don't take the skin off. We do fold it back. This animation just happens to show that the skin's pulled back, but we don't do that in reality. It's just reflected backwards to be able to be reapproximated later. But this is to demonstrate that now we begin into our internal examination to look at what's going on inside of the body. Obviously, the rib cage will be one of the first things that we're going to see, and we do remove that with some of the tools that you saw earlier. Then begins the evisceration process. Again, everybody wears masks in our office. These pictures, my husband will tell you, it's too much. But the evisceration process, a part of why we end up removing all of the organs is to be able to examine them for any type of pathology that exists within the individual, whether or not they knew whether or not their loved one had hypertensive cardiovascular disease, whether they had atherosclerosis. Any of these things we'll be able to demonstrate and be able to document by performing the autopsy. The organs will be removed from the body and then examined further. In addition, we will cut open the scalp and be able to look at the skull and be able to open up to look at the brain as well. And that's all part of the process to make the diagnosis and the determination of the cause of death and manner of death. In addition to some underlying pathology, of course, there may be trauma that we need to document, and that's part of the process to be able to do that. The organs do need to come out. They do get sectioned, they do get looked at, and we do it for each and every one of the organs that are inside of the body to be able to make the determinations I've discussed. During that process, we will also take samples. As we mentioned earlier when I talked about pathology residency, samples are taken of different pieces of tissue and retained and fixative to be able to look at and possibly generate glass slides for further diagnosis if necessary. Likewise, blood samples may be taken or tissue samples may be taken to do further testing. Throughout the entire process, beginning back at the scene investigation all the way through the entire autopsy process, we will take photographs for documentation so that we can go back and be able to look at them, whether we have to testify with that information or whether we need to document any kind of injury that's occurred. Photography becomes an integral part of what we do in terms of our examination and our determination. Likewise, in our office, we do radiology. Everybody that comes into our office will get a standard set of radiographs, and that's even before the autopsy procedure has occurred. So we will do a head, a neck, a chest, an abdomen, and a pelvis on every single one of our cases. If the case is suspicious in nature, for example, a homicide, then we'll do full body radiographs as well. And those become part of our evaluation as the forensic pathologist, as the medical examiner in our determination. Sometimes we can do our determination right there at the table, whether or not it's a gunshot wound to the head and it's a contact range, and we can make the decision of suicide based on a gunshot wound to the head. We can do it at that point in time at the table. But not always does that become true, and sometimes we have to move on into the microscopic realm to help make the diagnosis of what caused this person to die. This happens to be a little colon polyp here with a little bit of cancer on the top. as you saw from the pathologists earlier. In addition, we may have to do microbiology testing and be able to see whether or not someone died of pneumonia or some other infectious process that's caused their death. Or toxicology. As you can imagine, there's a number of drug overdoses that occur, whether they be illicit or whether they be prescription. The rising prescription deaths are pretty astronomical, and there have been several articles in our papers locally regarding that in Clark County. And that becomes part of our role in terms of doing the toxicology analysis. Documentation, all of that gets documented in the ways that I've already described, but also by myself in producing an autopsy report and information that I've culminated and kind of deduced on what's going on, what's next, what's happening with this case. And sometimes it requires help from different groups and different agencies to be able to put all of those pieces together, talking with law enforcement in terms of what happened at the scene, what other information that they have in regards to what happened in this particular case. Or we may be working with other scientists to be able to tell us, well, I don't really quite understand what's the role of this particular drug in this particular case. I've had cases here locally where people have overdosed on Windex or tried to kill themselves with different kinds of sprays or different kind of chemicals that you would commonly find. Well, I'm not familiar with some of those compounds, so I'll consult with the toxicologist to be able to get that information. Of course, with my report, once I've generated a report, I've made a determination of cause of death, of manner of death. I'll do a death certificate. But then you get to the point where that information becomes under question and for testimony for in court, particularly in our homicide cases. And we're often required to testify, and I often have. She's one of my favorite characters in terms of testifying. I enjoy her, so that's why she got to be this one. What is the death certification process? That becomes a big important key to the overall health of our world. Death certification, the actual death certificate, is going to have the cause of death, it's going to have contributing conditions, it's going to have the manner of death. And if that manner of death was not a natural death, it's going to have information about how that injury occurred. The cause of death is that condition that's resulted in the cessation of life. Here's the forensic pathologist talking with law enforcement. Here's the guy sitting by the cooler, and he says, cause of death is still unknown. We hope to learn more once he's dead. What are the manners of death? There are essentially 5 manners of death that are used here in Clark County. Natural is purely a natural disease process that's caused someone to die, atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease being an example. Accident, an unforeseeable or an unintentional event, whether or not that's a motor vehicle collision or whether or not somebody's taken too many of their prescription medications. Suicide, death at one's own hands, whether or not someone's decided to take their own life in whatever manner that is. Homicide, death at the hands of another. And of course, there's an undetermined category. If for some reason one of these manners of death is not clear based on whatever reason, or there are conflicting manners of death, or for example, a skeleton is found out in the desert and we don't know any information, there's no signs or information about that, that's an undetermined cause of death, an undetermined manner of death in that particular individual. Some cases remain unsolved, and we don't know what happened to that individual, and they may remain a cold case. Even when we don't have a skeletonized remains, sometimes that case is unsolved. To be a forensic pathologist, you're working long hours. You're working sometimes 10 to 12 hours a day. You need to be able to be confident in your information, be able to convey your information with some confidence and some degree, as you were saying, integrity, and I thought that was very well said. Thank you. To have good communication skills, but you also need to have both a working knowledge of medicine and a working knowledge of non-medical things as well. Forensic pathologists can work in a variety of offices. Here we happen to have a coroner's office, but you can work in a medical examiner's office, you can work for a hospital, you can work in private groups, and you can also work in various hospitals or medical schools. Some people know the term medical examiner. That's somewhat synonymous with forensic pathologist. Many people talk about coroners, and that's not always synonymous with what a medical examiner is. A medical examiner is a forensic pathologist, but a medical examiner must be a physician. They generally are forensic pathologists, but other physicians can practice as a medical examiner in different communities. It depends on the requirements by law. Regarding a coroner, though, they do not have to be a physician, and they can be appointed or they can be an elected person. What deaths become reportable? It's sudden and unexpected deaths. It's the gunshot wounds. It's the stabbings. It's the blunt force injury. It's the burns. It's the environmental. As you might guess, here in Las Vegas, we have a lot of hyperthermia deaths as opposed to hypothermia, where the temperature is too hot and people die from prolonged exposure. In addition, we may have more decomposed bodies that we end up bringing in, and although they may be an older individual and may have died of their related natural disease, because they're decomposed, their body hasn't been identified, and they come to our office for us to do the identification process. Of course, maternal and fetal deaths and other sudden and unexpected deaths as well. These are just some statistics from here in Clark County from 2014, and even if you look to the far right of this particular chart, you could see that people are generally still dying of heart disease, cancer, and lung disease. They're still kind of the top three. It's when you get into the age group of the 15 to the 44-year-olds that you start to see the accidents, the suicides, the homicides. It's kind of in that younger generation. So if you're like me and you made it past 44, chances are it's going to be your heart or lungs or something else. So, I don't know. I walk carefully. I stay in the crosswalk. Why is that important? Why does death certification become important? It plays a role in public health. Those statistics, that information that comes from the death certificate provides information for public health, provides vital statistics, and it allows us to do prevention, like the back to sleep programs for these children. I think forensic pathology is a little bit more demystified as time has gone on because it's become such a big portion of our culture now. It's become part of our prime time in just about every of our shows and in all of our books. Now we can look at who's our favorite character, who's our favorite forensic pathologist that gets to be part of our TV and part of our lives today, and even more of the reality-based TV shows with Dr. G being one of the more popular shows that are out there. They really have brought us into the forefront. Just to say, we do have a coroner visitation program here in Clark County. There is a small fee for it, and I have some pamphlets here if people are interested. It's recommended generally for people that are 14 years or older. They will see actual pictures of the dead, but they won't see dead bodies, and we do have an opportunity for people if they're interested. And I know that there'll be questions at the end, so thank you very much.